The American Civil War is over. Its survivors head out across the frontier, but eastern and western North America are separated by a vast wilderness. Veterans become railwaymen, cowboys, settlers. Together, they'll conquer nature and tame the Wild West. In 1865, 30 million buffalo roamed the Great Plains. A vast, untouched wilderness dividing America. Crossing the continent takes 6 months. 20,000 die on wagon trains. By ship, it's a 28,000-kilometer journey around South America. To unite East and West, President Lincoln greenlights a transcontinental railroad. Over 3,000 kilometers long, it will transform the nation, triggering a tidal wave of settlement across the Great Plains.
The railroads were vital to the expansion of America. This technology connects people in a way that never before in the history of mankind has there been that kind of connection.
America's ancient wilderness meets steel and muscle. An army of hammer-wielding men. Irish immigrants, Civil War vets, railwaymen. Their biggest obstacle? The mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. Where the Pacific and North American plates collide, millions of tons of ancient rock rise up. Over the last 4 million years, the mountains have risen more than 3 kilometers high. They're still growing, nearly 4 meters every 1,000 years. Only a madman would dream of building a railroad across mountains like this. And crazy Judah is what they call railway engineer Theodore Judah. His job is to plot a way through.
Come on down, boys.
Theodore Judah makes 23 trips into the peaks.
And pig that, boys.
Plotting a path for the engineering challenge of the century.
Yep. Let's mark that.
This is the most magnificent project ever conceived. An enterprise more important to the people of the United States than any other. The railroad will be built, and I will have something to do with it.
Americans love someone who can go through seemingly difficult or impossible things and make their dreams happen.
With Judah's route approved, 2 companies begin work. The Union Pacific starts from Omaha in the east. The Central Pacific from Sacramento in the west. They'll meet in Utah. It will cost over $2 billion in modern money, but the government doesn't have enough funds. So it pays the companies in federal land. They must finish in 15 years or lose everything.
We have learned in this country that you really don't get anywhere in life if you don't take some risks. I think America is by far the shining light of the world in so many ways because we are risk takers.
The railway companies are paid by the mile, and unscrupulous, they add curves just to increase their profits. A 14-kilometer curve means an extra 50 hectares of federal land. First, they must conquer the Donner Pass. More than 2 kilometers up, the highest point on Judah's route. It has 9-meter snowdrifts in winter and avalanches. The pass is named after the Donner Party, who got trapped here by snow 20 years earlier and resorted to cannibalism. Judah's route cuts through the mountain. 500 meters of rock must be excavated. The longest tunnel on the route. Immigrant Chinese laborers dig day and night.
The railroad magnates said, the Chinese built the Great Wall, didn't they? Let's bring the Chinese in to do this work.
Over 10,000 Chinese laborers earn less and do the most dangerous jobs.
The Transcontinental Railroad was built by Chinese workers brought over specifically to work on the railroad, and they were considered somewhere in between human and animal. They were not expected to survive. They were expected to come here and work and die.
"17-year-old Hung Lee Wo swaps a life of poverty in Canton for work on a railroad gang. The granite of the Sierra Nevadas is among the hardest on Earth. Progress slows to 15 centimeters a day. To break through, they need nitroglycerine, but it's so dangerous, transporting it is illegal. Scottish chemist James Howden mixes it on the spot. Nitroglycerine is 13 times more powerful than gunpowder. So unstable, any physical shock and it will explode in his hands. Howden gets hazard pay. He soon turns to drink, leaving the nitro to Chinese men like Hung Lee Wo. Irish crews won't touch it. Detonation creates temperatures of nearly 5,000 degrees Celsius, as hot as the surface of the sun.
So.
An estimated 1,500 Chinese workers die in explosions and rock slides. Hung Lee Wo survives. His son will be the first Chinese American to graduate in engineering from the University of California at Berkeley. Once through the mountains, track laying accelerates from 25 centimeters to nearly 10 kilometers a day. Each spike is struck 3 times. 10 spikes to a rail. 250 rails a kilometer. 21 million hammer swings. On May the 10th, 1869, a one-word message arrives by telegram. Done. A 6-month journey is cut to 6 days.
The folks who had once had to risk everything in a wagon train, that is eliminated. You now can get on the railroad and travel from Boston to Sacramento. That's a revolution.
The Transcontinental Railroad changes everything it touches, triggering a mass migration to the Great Plains. The Transcontinental Railroad threads a thin line of civilization through the wilderness. People follow. In just 1 year, 40,000 settlers moved to Nebraska, fanning out across the frontier in wagon trains.
When in the mid-19th century to the late 19th century, they went out and settled some hostile territory known to mankind in the Great Plains where I grew up. These were true pioneers.
The government accelerates the process with the greatest land giveaway in history. Anyone with a $10 filing fee can claim free land. A quarter are single women and ex-slaves.
When you see the desperate scramble in these rickety wagon trains, you realize that the promise of America was land. These are people who never in a million years would be able to own land in Europe.
Eventually, 10% of the United States will be given away under the Homestead Act.
I'm not going back to Indiana to rent until I bust entirely and have to walk back.
Civil War veteran Uriah Oblinger claims 65 hectares of Nebraska. But there's a catch. Baking summer heat sparks prairie fires. Trees can't survive the drought and flames. There's so little rain, nothing grows here but grass. Without timber to build houses, the new inhabitants build mud huts from prairie turf called sod. Uriah dismantles his wagon to make doors and windows.
They often had insects. They invited snakes. It was, well, pretty much like living in a burrow in the ground.
I think the pioneers did have it hard. They conserved, they were frugal. The one dress lasted a long, long time.
For Uriah's wife, Maddie, it's a price worth paying.
I expect you think we live miserable because we are in a sod house. But I tell you in solid earnest, I never enjoyed myself better. Every lick we strike is for ourselves, and not half for someone else.
The devout Oblingers face daily tests of their faith. With no mountains to stop the wind, the Great Plains generate massive thunderstorms.
The most objection I have to the weather here is the wind. There's a great deal of it during winter and spring, and being nothing to break it, one feels it more.
Don't go too far, honey.
The Oblingers live in Tornado Alley. More twisters hit this region than anywhere else on Earth. Over 400 every year.
Tell the folks they never seen a storm in Indiana. Only playthings.
.320-kilometer-an-hour winds spin into a vortex, sucking in air and anything not bolted down. In 1930, a man is carried 1.5 kilometers across Kansas. Fish and toads rain from the sky. the Oblingers take refuge in their heavy sod house, clinging to their newfound independence.
I think that we're a nation of people descended from tough old coots and tough old broads. And I say that with great admiration. They just wanted to control their own future and to have children who could control their own destiny.
Tornadoes aren't the only biblical challenge the Oblingers face. By a river in the Rockies, an ancient plague is brewing. It emerges to battle for the Great Plains. Locusts. After devouring the local vegetation, they release pheromones that signal it's time to move on and grow long wings. Swarms then head east on the wind, joining up over the Great Plains to become a plague. In 1874, they devour half of the crops in the West, 3 trillion locusts. Nearly a kilometer high, 160 kilometers wide, 1,600 kilometers long, they block out the sun. To men like Uriah, the locusts are the wrath of God. By 1892, half of the population of western Nebraska goes back east. Uriah stays.
You have to be brave in order to achieve in this country because nothing's set right there for you. You have to take chances. And I think bravery and fear are the same things. It's just a matter of how you react to that same feeling.
But those that stay are rewarded. Within 30 years, the locust is extinct. Its breeding grounds in the Rockies plowed over by settlers like Uriah. In 10 years, the Great Plains become the breadbasket of the country. Today, 50 million tons of wheat is farmed each year. But trees are still scarce, and to build towns, settlers need wood. In Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, loggers harvest over 200,000 square kilometers of trees. Green gold. The region becomes a magnet for Scandinavian woodsmen. Between 1825 and 1925, a third of Norway's entire population comes to America, including Nils Haugen.
The pay was $3 a day. You had to have a good pair of driving boots, well caulked, to be able to keep on top of the logs.
Keeping the logs flowing is a multi-million-dollar business. A logjam spells ruin. In 1886, pine to build 20,000 homes gets stuck on the St. Croix River. 45 million meters of wood. Remove the right log, and the rest will explode downstream. The wrong one can mean death. In 1892, nearly 1 billion meters of lumber will be cut in Wisconsin alone. It feeds the construction boom. Towns are built so fast, there's no time to name streets. They're given letters and numbers. The Great Plains is also home to 30 million buffalo. herds of up to 40 kilometers long race to summer breeding grounds on a collision course with the modern world. In the 1870s, the railroad brings a new kind of hunter to the Great Plains. They're driven by profit and fresh from the carnage of the Civil War. $2 million rifles are in circulation. 1 million veterans have a new target in their sights. Veteran Frank Mayer becomes a buffalo hunter.
I had nothing to look forward to in civilization. I was crazy about guns.
Mayer hunts 900-kilo buffalo easily capable of crushing a man. He picks them off from 180 meters.
If you could kill them, what they brought was yours. They were walking gold pieces.
Hunters cull the buffalo for its hide. In 1872, they ship over 1 million out of Kansas alone. They're worth $3 each back east. On a good day, Mayer earns more than the president. Long strips of buffalo leather are used in factories as drive belts. Other pieces become coats and shoes. To meet demand, hunters kill 8,000 buffalo a day, just for their hides.
For Americans, this is progress because this is a natural resource. From the Indian perspective, they couldn't understand what the white people were doing. But of course, they knew that the decimation of those buffalo herds would change their lives forever.
The Plains Indians depend on the buffalo and worship them.
The buffalo were our strength, from whence we came, and at whose breast we suck as babies all our lives.
Black Elk is 6 years old when the railroad arrives. Unlike the white hunters, his people waste none of their kill. Sinews become bowstrings, bones become cups and spoons. Skin is made into clothing, teepees, and coffins. Native Americans and buffalo have coexisted since the last ice age. Black Elk's ancestors hunted them on foot before there were horses to ride. The modern horse arrived in America in 1493, brought by Spanish conquistadors. Some escaped to the Great Plains, the perfect horse habitat. 400 years later, over 1 million run wild. Taming horses transforms the life of the Plains Indian. They become expert horsemen.
The battle cry went up, "Hookah!" which means to charge, and the hunters went in for the kill.
On horseback, the bow was the weapon of choice. In the time it takes to reload a gun, a warrior can ride more than 250 meters and fire 20 arrows. Buffalo can run at 55 kilometers an hour. Hunts can cover hundreds of kilometers over many days. It can take 15 arrows to kill a buffalo. White hunters like Frank Mayer use a single shot. He aims for the lungs. A clean kill, drops a buffalo without disturbing the herd. In just over a decade, 30 million buffalo are killed. After hunters take the hides, trainloads of men arrive to pick their carcasses. They make buttons from bones and grind down skeletons for fertilizer and porcelain. The primary resource keeping Native Americans alive soon vanishes. Facing starvation, they are forced onto reservations.
My great-great-grandmother, Grandma Big Eagle, was alive when buffalo hunting ended. They weren't just saying goodbye to a kind of a foodstuff. They were saying goodbye to a way of being in the world. And I think for them to look back on that was just unspeakably sad.
In 1889, just 85 wild buffalo exist in the whole United States. Their place is now taken by the great iron horses. Wandering cattle. And the iconic horseman who will herd them. The cowboy. The Civil War devastates the southern eastern seaboard. When it ends in 1865, there follows a period of reconstruction. The country's booming population also needs food. In Texas, over 6 million cattle roam wild. Worth $4 a head here, back east, they're worth 40. By 1868, the railroad spreads from the east, crossing Kansas, but it hasn't reached Texas. There's still 1,600 kilometers of Wild West between the herds and the railroad. For that kind of cattle drive, America needs a new kind of frontiersman. The cowboy. After the Civil War, 60% of the South's population lives in rural poverty. In search of work and adventure, young men from all over the U.S. flock west to cattle towns like Abilene, Wichita, and Dodge City. One farmhand heading to Texas is Teddy Blue Abbott. 23 years old, Teddy Blue is the son of a Nebraska homesteader.
My father wanted to tie me down and make a farmer out of me. Never. I ran away from home to become a cowboy.
The cowboy mentality, it's a spirit of individualism. I have a communion with the land, with my horse. It symbolizes a resistance to authority.
Teddy Blue is one of 35,000 cowboys. Who will drive cattle to the railroad in Kansas through 1,600 kilometers of unforgiving terrain and gangs of rustlers. For only $1 a day, cowboys must be skilled horsemen and cattle wranglers. The lasso dates back to the ancient Egyptians. Mexican ranchers have been using them for centuries and have passed their skills on to cowboys north of the border. Cattle brought over by the Spanish in 1493 have bred with settlers' cows from England, creating a new breed, Texas Longhorn. After centuries roaming the plains, they are wild and prone to stampede. Over 4 cattle drives, Teddy Blue buries 3 friends. One out of 3 cowboys is Hispanic or African American. After the Civil War, thousands of freed slaves head to Texas looking for work. One is a 23-year-old from Alabama, Nat Love. It's a first chance for him to feel he's judged for his skills, not just the color of his skin.
The guys on the team are as broad-minded as the plains. It's every creed for himself, and every friend for each other, to the end.
Many of the cowboys, to the surprise of most of us, happen to be African Americans. Black people have the dream of conquering the imagination just like white people do.
The West, vast, wild, lawless. With herds worth up to $200,000, cowboys guard the cattle with their lives and their guns. In Texas, guns become a way of life. Even today, Texans own over 51 million firearms.
It's very intrinsic to the American culture and the American identity. We always had a pistol or a rifle. And I think it's part of, don't try to tell me what to do. I'll fight off my enemies on my own.
The cowboy's gun of choice is the iconic Colt 45. Fastest handgun in the West. It fires 6 shots without reloading. Colt starts making them in 1873. Colt 45 costs $17, half a cowboy's monthly salary. Six rounds of bullets, half a day's pay. Frontiersmen have a saying, Abraham Lincoln may have freed all men, but Sam Colt made them equal. Altogether, 5 million cattle are herded from Texas to the railroad in Kansas. The largest migration of livestock in U.S. history. But one simple invention heralds the end of the cowboy's way of life. Barbed wire. In just 20 years, 2.5 million new settlers flood into the West. New farms cover more than 2 million square kilometers of open range, setting cattle rancher against homesteader. Cowboys like Teddy Blue experienced the collision firsthand.
They'd plant a crop next to the trail. When the cattle got into their wheat, they would come out waving a shotgun and yelling for damages.
Boundary disputes are violent and often deadly. The farmer who develops this cheap and effective way to keep livestock off his land is Joseph Glidden.
When we think about innovation in America, we often think about the big, audacious projects like the Apollo project. But there's another strain to American innovation, and that's the local inventor, an individual genius with some passion in the middle of the night coming up with that big transformative idea.
In the autumn of 1873, Glidden has his breakthrough. Using a coffee grinder, he crudely fashions some steel barbs. The problem is how to secure them. Glidden's solution: bind the barbs between 2 lengths of wire. His design cuts the price of fencing by 70%. Within 10 years, Glidden sells enough barbed wire to go around the world 25 times. Barbed wire divides the plains into farms and ranches and blocks the cattle trails. The open range is closed forever.
This single invention made possible the settling of the West much sooner and more efficiently than would have occurred otherwise.
Teddy Blue rides one of the last cattle drives to the railroad. The heyday of the cowboy on the open range has lasted only 20 years. But settling the Great Plains will mark the end of one way of life and the birth of another. By 1876, most of America's 300,000 Native Americans had been forced onto government reservations. But resistance is still fierce.
I think probably the darkest spot in our history, for me at least, is what happened to the Native Americans. We came here and confiscated their homeland. I think we have a real sense now of what our part was in that. One that I would love to see redefined, rewritten.
Across the Great Plains, the federal government acquires millions of hectares of traditional hunting ground to make way for the Iron Horse. The Sioux are forced deep into the Black Hills. As a young boy, Black Elk witnesses the coming of the railroad and the destruction of the buffalo. Now aged 12, he's about to be part of the Sioux Nation's last triumph.
White men come in like a river. They told us that they wanted only a little land. But our people knew better.
When gold is discovered in the Black Hills, 100,000 prospectors rush in to seek their fortune. The federal government wants to clear the area. On a reconnaissance mission with the 7th Cavalry, Lieutenant Colonel George Custer stumbles across the Sioux camp near the Little Bighorn River. Custer makes a fateful decision. With 700 soldiers, Custer charges a camp with 7,000 Native Americans. Within 3 hours, all the men in Custer's regiment are dead. The Sioux win the battle, but will lose the war. In response, US soldiers forced 3,000 Sioux warriors onto reservations. The rest scatter into small bands. For the next 14 years, the last free Sioux struggle on, until a final infamous incident.
Wounded Knee is a great scar on the American landscape.
On December 29th, 1890, the last band of independent Sioux surrender beside Wounded Knee Creek. As the cavalry disarms them, a gun accidentally goes off. It triggers a massacre. Within minutes, over 200 Sioux, men, women, and children, are dead. Now 27, Black Elk witnesses the aftermath.
When I look back now, I can still see the butchered women and children lying heaped and scattered, as plain as when I saw them with eyes still young. And I see that something else died there. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream.
The railroad has transformed North America. In just 30 years, nearly 50,000 kilometers of track crossed the continent, more than the rest of the world put together. Thousands of new towns spring up around it. There's a station every 12 kilometers. 5 rail lines link the east and west coasts. The coming of the railroad even changes time itself. Until now, Americans have set their clocks by the sun. There are 8,000 different times along 500 rail lines. scheduling trains is becoming impossible. On November 18, 1883, the continental US is reduced to just 4 time zones. Standard Time is born. The railroad is now the largest employer in America, with nearly 1 million workers. One is a 23-year-old station agent from rural Minnesota called Richard Sears. With the US adjusting to new railroad times, Sears turns entrepreneur and buys a batch of pocket watches. Then he offers them to other station agents and waits. He hits the jackpot. Orders flood in. Within 6 months, Sears sells all his watches. 2,500, earning 10 times his railroad salary. Realizing he can sell goods by rail, Sears hits on an idea that changes America: the mail order catalog.
I think Americans are naturally entrepreneurial. If you worked hard and if you had good ideas and you were willing to make short-term sacrifices, you could succeed in this country.
Next one, this is number 104.
10 years after selling his first pocket watch, Sears' catalog has grown to 700 pages. Now based in Chicago, he processes over 35,000 orders a day, delivering refrigerators, pianos, and in 1 year, over 100,000 sewing machines. Using the railroad, Sears can sell virtually anything, anywhere in the country.
What really transformed this country wasn't just the westward migration and the development of cities in the east, but the ability to move products across great distances, linking together what had previously been very disparate little settlements that had to be largely self-sufficient.
By the end of the 19th century, America has over 300,000 kilometers of railroad track, linking its local markets and creating a national economy. Over the next 40 years, rail freight soars from 55 to 700 million tons. Raw materials from the West feed industries in the East. The United States overtakes Britain as the largest manufacturer on Earth, soon producing 30% of the world's goods.
The railroads laid the basis for the creation of the single largest market in world economy. And this made it possible for the United States to become the global economic power that it did by the end of the 19th century.
In 20 years, the population doubles. The number of cities trebles. And where buffalo once roamed, the modern world now rises.